here on behalf of Quick. Unfortunately, I don't have a Quick T-shirt because my sizes were out. So hopefully you can recognize me from the pro wrestling cat T-shirt. So I will be here with my colleagues. There is Tia over there, and Mariella is also there, and then we have Emilia. Yes. She started, she's new, and yeah, I should remember her name already, but this is I think I will remember her name now. So, yes, as I said, I'm from Quick, and I'm one of our technical recruiters here, and I will be giving you like few practical advices on like how our office works and everything like that. So there is beer and other refreshments in the fridge. Like everything you can see in the fridge, they are up for grabs. So feel free to get something to drink. And if we run out of beer, there is still a few beers left there in the floor. So we can then put those on the fridge also. And also there in front of the fridges there are pizza. So feel free to stock up on pizza if you are feeling hungry. And if it seems that we are running out of pizza, we can always order more, but we were a bit like sparse this on the first run because we don't want to it to get to waste. So yeah, let's see if we need some more. And then about the bathroom situation, there is 2 bathrooms on that corridor there. There are all of the bathrooms are unisex, so you can use any bathroom you want. But if you end up in the closet, you've gone too far. Come one door backwards. So please don't do your business in the closets. And there are also a few bathrooms beyond the pizza and drinking section. So just go beyond the doors, and then you will find them there. And again, there's like double locks, so there are locks on both of the doors, so just lock them both so we are spared from any embarrassing surprises or anything like that. And about like the plates and napkins and everything like that, please, if you could throw them in the trash once you are done with them. And those metal cans and glass bottles and everything like that, they will go to those metal containers, which is one is where Mariella is standing and the other one is right next to the door. And the soft drink bottles, those plastic ones, they will go to those white containers. There's one next to the soft drink fridge, and the other one is over here, but I think that will be a bit more accessible because there's going to be speeches here. And yes, and in behalf of Quick, I warmly welcome you here. And if you have any other questions regarding Quick, our culture, or anything like that, feel free to ask us, and we will gladly talk more with you.
What does Quick do?
We are a consultancy company. That is a really good question. We are experienced in consumer applications and consumer services, and we've been working or doing this for 13 odd years now. So yes, as I said, specialized in consumer services, so such as VR and Yle and these kind of all bigger companies here in Finland, but we also have some collaboration with Spotify also. So we offer front-end expertise, back-end design, payment consulting. Those are like the four cornerstones of Quick. So yeah, and as every consultancy company, we are also hiring. So if you are looking for new opportunities, come and talk to us, and we'll see what happens.
That was going to be my question, but
yes, I thought that might be one.
Cool.
So yeah, again, if you have any other questions, feel free to ask us. And yeah, let's enjoy the meetup and the hopefully awesome speeches that are coming next. Thank you.
Nice. And now we'll just have a couple of minutes, show the agenda and stuff.
Yes.
Before you get going from the organizer side.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to let us know?
I'm gonna log out from Slack first. I think it's probably a good idea to
Slack can
shut down all the other windows.
Like HDMI. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so while we set up the AV change laptops, welcome from my side as well. I'm Lucas, one of the organizers of this meetup. We have the three other organizers, unfortunately, in other places today, but we'll keep going still. Thank you all for coming today. It's nice to see so many of you here. And yeah, we really have three really good speeches today. Let's see. Yeah. Really good speeches. We also are really lucky to have our guest from Sweden even come here, being the first talk. And yeah, let's get going. So our schedule, as you have seen, is like this. We try to do, I don't know, try to do some consistency, but we couldn't find any, so we put security and bare metal as a team instead of just one. So kind of solved it quite easily in that way. And just a little bit of background about what we are and what we do. We are also collaborating with, or have this kind of umbrella of meetups called Cloud Native Nordics, and we are 13 different cities in the Nordic countries. I have a couple from Sweden, then 3 of us in Finland, and then also in the rest of the Nordics. And these have been really active before. Now we're getting back up and doing that kind of in a joint effort with kind of joint infrastructure and marketing. And it's not only us here. We are a handful of us in Finland, but here's also other people. Anton is joining us from Turku, the Turku meetup today as well. And very nice that we have still kind of continued growth in this group, although having a break for some time. Essentially, on the code of conduct side, just we want everyone to be nice, respectful, thoughtful to each other, include everybody. That's it in a nutshell. And here are our different kind of ways to get acquainted with the community. Well, we are live streaming this on YouTube as well. We have a GitHub. Slack is a good place for you to kind of get to know other people within the Nordic community as well, if you have any questions. And well, we're also always looking, in the same way as every company we're coming to, when we're rotating here, they say they are hiring. We are always looking for speakers as well to this meetup. So next one is going to be in August, late August or something like that. We'll go on a summer break first. But yeah, if you have some kind of thing you would like to talk about, then just ping us in any of the ways you can find us online. That is working. And a couple of notes about Cloud Native Computing Foundation also. The CNCF, the kind of umbrella foundation for these meetups that also help us in other ways. Kind of helps all the community people, the projects, the companies, the enthusiasts to come together in one kind of neutral place. They organize, well, they kind of gather all of the different projects, or not all of them, but a fair decent amount of them. And they started this project where if you have a cloud native project, you can kind of submit a PR to GitHub, then they auto-generate this PNG, but now you really need some high-resolution device. Luckily, we have one to figure this out. But CNCF helps with kind of figuring out what is of high quality, how to start, like this, for example, where to start, how to get going with your journey. And well, these meetups and the community around this is one of the ways that they're kind of helping in different ways. So me and Untitled that are running this meetup are also CNCF ambassadors and kind of help with these things. I think we'll skip this one. We'll see it in action a bit, but yeah. They host different kinds of projects, so projects that are generally kind of applicable to many different users, use cases, and of the most high quality projects are graduated. Then we have those that are still yet to be kind of improved in the incubating phase, and then we have a lot of experimental and kind of up-running projects in the sandbox phase. So summarized as this, kind of the really, here we have the most mature projects that are really been hitting the late majority and the kind of vast amount of people and companies, users throughout the world, which Kubernetes is one of them, is one of the projects. And then just a quick shout out to that if you're interested in getting to know more about this, you can join what CNCF organizes, the KubeCon and Cloud Native Con. It's in Europe in a week, more or less. And you can join physically, that works, but you can also join virtually. So it's a hybrid combination, and it's really fun. I definitely recommend it. In Valencia, and CNCF also hosts. This is one of the things, but they also host a million different podcasts, different podcasts, YouTube series, all kinds of knowledge content. Just the screenshot of this was like 6 things in 2 days. So it's really a good way to get started. They also, if you're kind of new to this, they publish these annual reports. What is it all about? Where some stats about the community? What is kind of what are the key players? What are the kind of key projects? How to get involved? All of these kind of things you'll find from that. So here is for one example. You can see that the momentum isn't slowing down, which is nice to see, and also the same thing they do for Kubernetes. We can really see that it became really the mainstream and the main ways of doing things in the latest year, essentially. So yeah, all kinds of different statistics. But that is, I don't want to take more time than this for our good talk. More time than this for our really good talks. But here are all the ways that you can get in touch with us as well. And yeah, I hope you have enjoy this meetup today. And yeah, if there's anything you can talk to me or the people from the quick side. Yeah.
One thing you could mention as well is that if you don't have time to watch all the talks from KubeCon, I think Cloud Native Nordics is going to do a live stream, like some kind of panel discussions afterwards. Pick up the good parts and like stream that on YouTube as well. That will be a virtual thing, right?
Yes. So that is one of the things that we do. So like, and it's also worth mentioning that all of even though you don't go to KubeCon and participate even kind of through the virtual thing, the virtual platform, then you can even watch all of the talks from all of the KubeCons retroactively on YouTube. So everything is kind of out there, free of charge. Just go and get it. But because there are like in the order of 200 different talks, maybe more, 250 talks on a single KubeCon, it can be quite overwhelming to know, okay, so what should I look for? What is a good part? And that's where we kind of organize these, for example, panel discussions. People went to KubeCon, they kind of talk about their impressions and feelings from it, and then you can get links to some of their recommended talks. So that's really good. And maybe lastly, we're organizing a Turku meetup as well in exactly 2 weeks from now, right?
Yeah, 24th. So
Yeah.
like 2 weeks from now, Tuesday. It will be in Vadi's offices. Like if you want to take a train ride down to Turku, it's like right next to the Kupitna train station. And yeah, I think we should have our rail tracks.
Yeah.
In order, like they're doing some kind of large renovation there now. I'm not really sure what's happening.
Yeah. But
And that will also be live streamed. So if you can't attend in person and still want to hear about cloud native stuff, then you can just dial into the YouTube channel. So.
Yep. Okay. Very nice. Then we'll let Lars start his talk.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let's see if we can figure out the text.
Yeah. It's always the hardest part.
Yeah. Well,
Så att jag fick en slide, jag vågar inte på slidesen av.
that's very nice looking, but says no signal.
So here's your might be that you need to go to the settings and do duplicate. Sometimes it doesn't. You have Linux, right? Yeah. Or yeah, at least for me.
Of course.
Quite. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It has recognized it.
Mirror.
Interesting. Do I want to do that though?
I
Should we
Thank
try
you.
with the Mac adapter?
think that's
It-
apply.
No, it thinks it has made the changes, but it
Keep,
hasn't
but
actually.
keep it and we'll see.
Well, this is always a great way to start a talk, right? So the first session, thank you for introducing, is my session called NSA Security Hardening Guidelines for Kubernetes. And why should you even care, essentially? And the thing is that security, and especially Kubernetes security, is sadly in a not so great state right now. So containers live in a world where 56% of companies are not even scanning their images for vulnerabilities. And around 70% of companies will run containerized workloads by next year. I don't know what the number is right now, but I mean, it's insane. People aren't checking for these things. And misconfiguration makes up 59% of Kubernetes security incidents. At least this is what a Red Hat report says. And you can find that if you follow the links. I'll make these slides available somehow. So that's the reality for containers. So whatever you hear here tonight about security and about running things in Kubernetes, apparently security has been sort of an afterthought. And that's not great, because there's an uncomfortable question that I'd like to ask, and that is, what permission have you given me in your Kubernetes cluster if I manage to hack into your application? And many people just go, I don't know. But after this presentation, I hope that the answer will be different than I don't know, or the face of panic. Who am I and why should you listen to me? Well, I'm this guy, and I've been working with cloud since 2008, Kubernetes since 2016 or so. And yeah, I'd love for us to be connected on LinkedIn, so please connect with me on LinkedIn. I talk about DevOps, Kubernetes, and security, and also compassionate leadership. So please connect with me there. So the subject matter of this talk was really the NSA/CISA, which I never remember what that stands for, Kubernetes Hardening Guide. It used to be Guidance, but now it's just called Guide. It's a tech report that they published in 2001, last year, and now they updated it in March this year. It focuses on Kubernetes itself. So there's detailed discussion about security-related configuration that you can make. And they have quite a bit of example code as well to make it easy to understand what does this look like in practice to use whatever they suggest, right? So that's good. Some criticism from me already now is that essentially they only mention other security software and kind of do that in passing because it's really focused on Kubernetes. And it focuses mainly on hardening Kubernetes clusters. It doesn't, so it's more about like how you set it up correctly in the first place. It doesn't really cover, at least according to me, security as a process, which, as we all know, security is not just like a one-time thing that you check off a list and then you're done, you're secure. No, it's actually a process, right? So let's get right down to it, because I believe I only have like 30 minutes and I've probably wasted quite a few of them already. So the first thing in the report that they talk about is that you need to scan containers and pods for vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. And that's great, considering the stats I just showed earlier, that yes, obviously you need to consider your configuration. Now, as a user of Kubernetes, you have to both understand, okay, how am I configuring my pods? How am I also configuring my cluster? We'll get to both. Right now, this is the first one. How do I configure my pods? So if you worked with containers before, hands up if you worked with containers. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Maybe I should have asked, like, how many of you used Kubernetes as well? Oh, crap, it's not so many. I wonder if you'll want to after I'm done with this talk. I hope you still want to. Anyways, so if you use containers, and quite a few have, you know that they are immutable. So once you've built them, they don't change. And that's really nice, because I can take my container and I can just publish it to registry and I can run it somewhere else, and it's going to run the same no matter where it happens to run. That's wonderful. However, what's less wonderful is that that code is now in like a time capsule. And during just a matter of weeks, new vulnerabilities will appear. They will become known, and all of a sudden, it's not that attractive anymore to have old software running that doesn't change. So, and that goes extra for if you have stable components, right? So some code you probably change like all the time. You have some microservices or whatever that you change all the time. But after a while, you know, some of them may be stabilized. Maybe they don't need that many updates. They don't get that much developer attention, but they should still get some kind of updates for all the underlying software that happens to be in those containers. So how do I know if I currently have vulnerable code in my container images? Well, you can scan it. Essentially, it's like virus scanning, but it's for vulnerabilities. So that's something you can do. It's integrated into basically all container registries these days. The report says you can use an admission controller in Kubernetes. Hands up if you know what an admission controller is. Okay, nice. To those that don't know, it's essentially a piece of software that gets to run and look at every API call coming into the Kubernetes container orchestrator, right? And it gets to look at that API call and make like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Essentially, it runs before the API server starts to do anything to the API call, starts processing it. So there, if I say, run this pod, an admission controller could go, yeah, okay, cool, cool. Let me just check to see if it's vulnerable first, then I'll run the pod. All right? Sounds like a very good idea. And it is. But there's a problem. And that problem is if you have stable components that don't change. So if you have a component that doesn't see any updates for like a month, I mean, the fact that it got scanned when I said deploy it, well, that was a month ago, and now there are vulnerabilities that are known. So What I think you should do, nerd smiley down there, what I think you should do is you should daily scan all the images that have been deployed in production. So that just go through them all and run a scan on them. Because since they don't change, if you just look at what's running in the cluster, you can just say, oh, well, please scan that and tell me if there's anything wrong. If there is something wrong, then you know that you need to act on it. You need to rebuild it. This is not very difficult to do, by the way, but it has quite a big impact. We all know that there's this thing called the principle of least privileges, right? So you should run containers and pods with the least privileges possible. Now, as anyone who's used containers knows, standard for containers is to run as root within the container. And you think, well, it's a container. You hear from the name, it's contained within there. It doesn't matter. Like root in the container, that's no problem. Yes, it is. Because we have container breakout vulnerabilities coming up all the time. I think we had like 3 major ones already this year, all right? And it's only May. So you need to restrict that. Don't run containers as root if you can help it. Make sure that you have a read-only file system for your containers. Restrict using pod security policies if you're using like an old version of Kubernetes, or pod security standards if you're using a new version of Kubernetes. An interesting choice in Kubernetes is that, okay, so Kubernetes is built for what? Like automation, okay? So all pods get the default service account for a namespace. I know, this is like super detailed, but when a pod runs in Kubernetes, it gets access to the Kubernetes API. Why? I'd say like less than 1% of all pods actually need to talk to the Kubernetes API. Most are just, I don't know, REST services that Quick develops, They don't need to actually talk to the Kubernetes API, but they all have the ability to, and that's just insane. So disable that really weird default behavior. And then, of course, yes, you can also, this is also in the report, you can limit how the software interacts with the kernel by using something like seccomp, AppArmor, or gvisor, or whatever, something to like sandbox your container even further, because although the name sounds really good, it doesn't actually contain your code all that well. Right, and I want to add to this that please also, if you have any policies that can be automatically enforced, there's a wonderful piece of software called the Open Policy Agent that can also look at all the API calls coming in to your Kubernetes API. Have it look through that, all those API calls. It has a set of rules, so it can actually say, no, this is not fine to run this particular API call. When it comes to the use of networks, Kubernetes, by default, you'll understand. So my overarching message here is Kubernetes is not secure by default. You actually have to do stuff, and it's not even secure by itself. But something that you can, and I think you must do, is that you must use network separation to make sure that you perform damage control. So essentially, in Kubernetes, there's something called network policies. They work like firewall rules. So you can say, these components get to talk to these components, but nothing else. So you can have a backend component that gets to talk to a database, but it's only the backend component that gets to talk to the database. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because if somebody manages to hack into the front end component or whatever, they're not supposed to be able to connect directly to the database. So default is everything goes. Default settings in Kubernetes is like any component can talk to any component, and that's not a very good default. So you need to like separate that out. And the thing to do that with is called network policies. It's super easy to use, but it has a very big impact because who here remembers the log for shell thing that we had earlier this year? What was the problem with log for shell? Does anyone remember? essentially you could trick, yeah.
It could escape and make arbitrary network requests.
Exactly, yeah, it could. So you fooled some Java code to make calls to a different server than it was really supposed to. So something the hacker controlled, and then the hacker could like load Java classes from there into the process, and game over. So that was like a perfect 10 security vulnerability. There's ways of grading these things. It's a perfect 10 CVESS score. Would not have happened if you just had firewall rules in place, because there's no reason for that component to even get to make that call out to the hacker's server in the first place. So just have rules in place that contain your pods so that they only make the appropriate network calls they're supposed to be able to make. Simple. You can also, so that was like within the cluster, so between pods, but also outside of the cluster, there's of course a network. So you want to restrict traffic coming in, and also you probably also want to have some kind of encryption between your hosts within a Kubernetes cluster. Why? Well, because maybe you don't trust the network. So if you Google for zero trust networking, the idea is that we shouldn't have any more like trusted networks that we just assume are fine. Not even if they happen to be running in the cloud, it's still probably a good idea to do some kind of encryption. Also, you want to restrict access to Kubernetes core components, the API server, the etc database, controllers, stuff like that. If you think it sounds difficult to have encryption enabled at all times, or something you need like a service mesh for, no, you don't. You could actually just use a networking provider within Kubernetes that supports it. So if you click the link, you can go read up on that, like how you can get essentially like VPN-like encryption within your Kubernetes cluster, so between nodes. I'll have to see if that's something that Lennart, for instance, will talk about. No. Now I'm making it difficult for him. But it's very easy for me to say here that you're supposed to enable it. So very easy to enable, but it has quite a bit of impact too. Within a cluster, within any kind of cluster, within like the cloud, anywhere, you need to make sure that you limit your attack surface. So you want to have users authenticate. You want to then authorize them, and the way to do that is with, say, role-based access control. So all these features exist in Kubernetes, but they're not there by default. The thing that is there by default is when you install it, you get like the admin token. It never expires. It's like you get the master key, and most people, sadly, just keep using that, essentially. And yes, role-based access control, the system exists there. It's actually enabled now by default, but the only role, cluster admin. So it's quite ridiculous that, yes, there are security measures in place, but they're not really enabled. So you need to enable them. So throw away that perpetual admin token. That's not a good idea. Or if you want to keep it for like a break glass scenario, like, uh-oh, everything else is broken, we need to really use this, it's an emergency, fine. But don't keep using it as a standard thing always. Rather, use something like OpenID Connect. If you have a provider that works with OpenID Connect, maybe you could connect it to your Google accounts, your Microsoft accounts, your whatever accounts, and that way you can also get group membership information, so that, like, okay, Lars is a consultant for this company. The second we take him out of the Active Directory, he has no permissions anymore. That's probably a much better idea than giving him a file that gives him like admin access forever, right? Okay.
It's the cleaning cycle. It will stop soon.
Sure. Kubernetes has anonymous access, because why wouldn't it? That's enabled by default. And yeah, as I said, the only role that is in Kubernetes by default is cluster admin. So you should probably set up something more restrictive for your users. Kubernetes can also, again, something you need to enable, but Kubernetes can also log whatever happens towards its API server, and that's called audit logging. So every single API call gets logged, and it gets logged with like who tried to do something, what did they try to do, and what was the result. So you can do that. You should also then make sure you log at appropriate levels so that the contents of an API call does not reveal something like, say, a secret, because it will if you log the entire request. That's probably not a good idea. You'll get tons of logs this way, so you really want an automated system to take care of it, to just look through it all and automatically see if there's an anomaly and alert you in that case, because you can't just look through this yourself. It's going to be completely impossible. That sounds expensive, right? To have like huge collection of logs and to also have something that looks through it. Well, it's actually not that difficult, and there are open source solutions for this. So if you have OpenSearch, you know, the Elasticsearch, but like with an actual open source license, you can store logs in there, and then you can set up something called Falco from Sysdig to look through these logs. And it can act as a quite basic but still workable system for doing this stuff. You need to periodically scan, review, and patch Kubernetes itself, because Kubernetes itself releases about 3 times a year. And that means that, and also you don't really want to be more than 1 version behind, because yes, it's the old versions or, yeah, current and back 3 versions, they still get security updates, but it's a hassle to like version jump. So you really want to just like keep upgrading. So it's a considerable amount of work to keep Kubernetes up to date. Security features, as I've said, they're typically opt-in rather than opt-out. And you need to opt in as soon as possible. So the things I've been talking about here, you should enable all kinds of security features. And there are tools that can do some automated testing that can help find insecure default settings. It's not very hard to do, but it can have quite a bit of impact. So a question then, are automated vulnerability scanning tools sufficient? There are 2 that have quite a bit of mind share in the community. One is called Kubescape, one is called Kubebench. They work by investigating both the Kubernetes API, like what information can it get from the Kubernetes API. It can also connect directly to the like master nodes or control plane nodes and figure out information from there. I think that's very, very good to do. It's obviously something you need to do, because if you don't do it, it basically screams like, here's an insecure cluster, because you can find vulnerabilities by just connecting to it. So that's obviously not a good idea, to not having run these things. But do keep in mind that they are limited in what they actually can investigate, and they always will be. So if your organization has rules in place for like who gets to do what, these tools are not going to be able to tell you that, no, this set of users, they have too much permissions, because how would such a tool know? They also can't investigate whether, you know, your storage has encryption at rest, if you have firewall rules that they don't have like encoded here in the Kubernetes system, if there are security policies in other systems than your Kubernetes, the host operating system, etc., third-party software that isn't even integrated with these scanners, there are many things that they can't scan. And there are many things that this report from the NSA, it's like a 60-page document, so I mean, I'm flying over, obviously. There are many things that can't really be scanned automatically, but some things can. And you for sure need to patch those things, because otherwise, as I said, it basically screams, here's an insecure cluster, come hack it. So in summary, Kubernetes is neither safe by default nor by itself. You need to restrict access to both the network, to users, to machines, and you need to restrict their privileges as well, so they don't have more privileges than you intended them to have. You should periodically use tools to assess your current security practices. You know, you should have these automated scanners. Prevent misconfiguration is what I think you should do. You shouldn't just scan after the fact to see if you've done it. And to do that, you have these policy as code tools, like for instance, Open Policy Agent that I mentioned. Please keep in mind that you're running these things often in the cloud, so any permission that you happen to have given the virtual machines that the Kubernetes cluster runs on, you kind of also given that to the pods that run on that machine. You should always foster a security conscious engineering culture, and if you have a disaster recovery plan, that's wonderful. And I think you should see security breaches as a disaster that would trigger your disaster recovery plan. Because if you realize that, oh crap, we've been hacked, essentially you need to like go back in time with backups, etc., and restore from a known good state, if at all possible. So going back to that question again from the beginning, what permissions have you given me in your Kubernetes cluster if I manage to hack into your application? Well, I hope the answer can be no more than absolutely needed, and that you will see that I'm there because you have automated systems that both limit what I can do and that they raise an alert when I make the application behave in ways that it doesn't normally do. So I hope that you can have these automated systems in place, intrusion detection, etc. So that was rather quick. If you have any questions, please fire away. Or send them via LinkedIn. Yes?
Was the pun intended?
Which pun?
It was rather quick.
Yeah, well. It wasn't. Yes?
Have you tested any of these Kubernetes distributions that like ship compliant by default? Like I know at least RKE2, like it's FIPS compliant, and like CIS 1.5 1.6 should pass by flying colors.
He's building one as well.
Yeah.
You are building one
No,
yourself?
you.
I am, yes. Yeah, I work for a company that does exactly that. I didn't want to turn this into a sales pitch, but I see this kind of like a vampire that got like invited in. Now I feel like now I get to actually talk about that. So, so thank you. No, exactly. So even though you couldn't see all the pixels on the like CNCF landscape that you saw before, Elasticist, the company that I work for, is there. We make an open source Kubernetes distribution called Compliant Kubernetes, where the idea is exactly to be the Kubernetes platform that you can install. You can either install it yourself, it's open source, you can install it on premise, however you want. It ships with everything you need to turn like just virtual machines into a reasonable Kubernetes-based platform. So like a logging system, monitoring system, vulnerability scanner, container registry, the works, all of it. And that's really nice. We also manage it as a service. So if you don't want to play around with Kubernetes, you just want to use it, you don't want to like have any administration of it at all, we take on that as well. And we are happy that we are actually partners with a Finnish cloud provider called UpCloud. And so yeah, we have a cloud presence here in Finland that, and other places around the world, but I mean, hey, I'm in Helsinki. Maybe you care more about Finland than other places, right? And that's really good because that lets us target customers that have the desire to run Kubernetes, but for various reasons they can't use American cloud providers. And I mean, we will soon hear a talk about installing Kubernetes on bare metal machines. So there's definitely, there are many good reasons why you would probably not run in a cloud at all, and like that's what Lennart will talk about, but a US cloud provider in general, because of GDPR and data privacy reasons, etc. Any other questions?
No, just to answer the question.
Sure.
You talked about distributions that are claiming to put compliance on top and that claim to be CIS compliant and so on, right? So
Yeah.
CIS is only going to get you so far.
Yep.
A lot of the recommendations from CIS is going to be on how do you configure your Kubernetes cluster. What are the specific flags that you're supposed to set for the cluster to be somewhat secure, but they're not really gonna secure your application per se.
Yeah, true.
So even if you have a fully compliant CIS cluster, like you're still gonna get fucked.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
it
If
is
you don't do
actually
it
the
correctly,
bare
that's not-
minimum
yeah.
that you can enable in a cluster. If you don't have CIS, you're just asking for it, basically.
Yeah.
Taking that aside, there are some distributions that are doing quite well in terms of security. EKS surprised me recently by enabling SLinux, and that's great. I honestly think SLinux is the best you can do right now for runtime security in terms of your containers. OpenShift is not so bad. RKE is now working on SLinux policies as well. So look for runtime security. He mentioned gvisor, he mentioned AppArmor. AppArmor honestly is not so good, but gvisor
No.
is doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So
Kind of slows it down though.
if you really want security,
Yeah.
you are
Turn
gonna
off
fall
your
out
computer.
slower. And the kind of customers that really want security don't really care that much about
It's like
performance to that
don't
extent.
run two things on the same CPU.
No.
And
There you
don't
go.
connect it to the
For-
network.
For a while, that almost was like the.
state
you
of the art.
yeah, you remember when we had those cache bugs? Yeah. No, but that's true, and I mean that's one of the so the CIS benchmark is one of the things that you can scan for using KubeBench.
Yeah.
You can get like your CIS score, and Kubescape also gives you like a grading essentially, like here's how well you conform to. They actually have like a test suite for the NSA guidance stuff. So I mean you can run that and just see what it finds. It's always a good idea because yeah, as I said, if you don't run it and somebody else manages to run it and see like, look at that, here's my way in, then obviously that's not going to make anyone happy except for that hacker.
Yeah, but it's definitely a hard thing. Like there is no general way of solving the problem because all of the environments are so different. So
Absolutely.
that's why it's good to have these kind of talks to see what is points of consideration essentially.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean and that's also why we take on the task of managing this stuff for people so that they don't have to do it. So if somebody like really loves to administer their own Kubernetes cluster, they will probably be quite upset because we don't give them those permissions. They get to be admins, like customer admins. But they can't do anything admin-y to the cluster. That goes, yeah. Right. No, thank you so much. Would you like to have the microphone?
No, I think. Thank you,
Thank you.
for the talk. It was great. There we go. And now we'll have a 20-minute break-ish. So networking, I know things are. It's one of.
Is it secure networking?
What?
Is it secure networking?
Hopefully. It should be. It should be. It's up to you all. But yeah, 20 minutes or something like that, and then we'll move on with the next talk. I saw there's more pizza. Probably more things to get hold of. So, yeah.
Juho, and I'm coming from Maverick Software. And I'd say that the previous presentation was very nice, and I think that some of these things that I'm going to show or talk about relate quite heavily on that one. So let's get started. So first of all, as said, I come from Mavericks. We are quite new player at the consultancy field, and we are part of the Withered, whose this share issue was actually just ended that last Friday, and the results were announced, I think, yesterday evening or today morning. But yeah, so what we do then, we basically offer consultants for the project, but specifically we are not doing kind of the full-fledged project ourselves. We are just offering people and working kind of like, let's say, in the middle between freelancers and normal paid jobs. But that's about the company. And then about me. So, as said, at Mavericks, working as test and DevOps engineer, and have been consultant, well, quite a long time. And as the educational background, I'm the Master of Science from University of Helsinki. But as you see, no major related to this computational science. Of course, my main thing was actually computational physics, but it's a bit different thing.
Is your mic on?
Sorry, I try to speak a bit closer. Yeah, and then I also contribute some open source things like Robot Framework and Progen and AWS CDK. And as maybe you see from the images at the bottom, I'm quite enthusiastic about cloud and DevOps thing. So that's about me. And then about the thing that you came here to hear about. So we have an issue. We have those managed Kubernetes clusters at Azure or AWS or Google, and they of course love their own IDP solutions, and they are very picky about their own solutions, so they don't want anyone else to play with those. So if you want to use something, you have to use their own. Before anyone says anything about EKS, yes, I know, and that's the next slide about that. But basic thing is that if you want to use them, you have to use Google's IDP or Azure AD or AWS things. So basically, thing that actually this issue came from was that all the developers are of course at GitHub because code is at GitHub. But because we are using the managed Kubernetes, we had this kind of issue at the bottom. So for the Google running one, we needed Cloud IAM. And for the Azure running one, we required Azure AD. And it was quite cumbersome because the developers didn't need any other access to those clouds. They were just needing access to do some things inside the clusters. And as I mentioned, EKS is a kind of not fully at same league as those other ones because AWS is not so picky. They don't have that same kind of IDP than Google and Microsoft has. So EKS allows you to use public or providers which have public endpoints. So not internal ones, but kind of GitHub would have fit quite well there. But that's only one, and we had multiple. So there is a solution, and it's called Kube OEDC Proxy, which is made by JetStack. So it basically proxies the Kube API calls with a kind of authentication. So because normally when you have vanilla Kubernetes, you can have masters. You can make that to support OEDC authentication. But with managed ones, no, you don't. So that's something that was kind of the issue. And as mentioned, the EKS has this difference from those two other ones. And actually this JetStack project is quite silent or have been silent quite a long time. But while doing this, I noticed that there's the company called Tremolo Security who has forked this proxy and released a new version. So also in that part is kind of, it's not dead project. It's just kind of maintained by other player. And also other part with this solution, because the OEDC proxy itself is quite boring. It just proxies things. You still have to somehow get the tokens for the kubectl, for example, to be used. And that's where this gangway comes in. So it offers nice UI where people can get the tokens and configuration for the kubectl. Well, bad thing is that that's VMware's Tanzu thing and it's archived, but it's quite simple, so maybe if you read the code, you see if it's something you want to use or not. And how this then looks in kind of real life. We have the gangway, as mentioned. Nice things, very, well, not necessarily so friendly for eyes, but something just works. And of course, magic happens at the signing. And, whoa, I mean, one thing you didn't notice here that actually I was authenticated, but because I have signed into GitHub, it didn't need to go there, and I approved the application, so it didn't need to I didn't need to approve it again. But what I see here, okay, I can download config, or I can just take nice copying thing, and that's it. And with the just saying that this is not kind of ready recorded thing, I take this Bitnami's kubectl container, so which of course I don't have anything because there's no configuration for that one. But now with this magic from this gangway, I can make something magical happen. So I'm basically now at the cluster itself and can do basically anything that you can do with the kubectl or same kind of tools that use the same connection. So quite nice. I've managed those. Basically, the naming tells where this cluster is running. So it's just Google normal cluster running there and with some quick setup. So it's now usable without using the Google own IAM. Just with the with GitHub, with restrictions related to what GitHub organization I'm member of, what GitHub groups I'm member of, etc. Of course, this is the kind of bad example because now I'm cluster admin, but this was demo. Actually, at the real use, we are using multiple groups. So some groups get higher rights and some groups get rights only to specific namespaces, specific rights. So it's kind of, basically, that's as mentioned, this is the role-based access. So it just matters what you configure. Yeah, that was the first part. Then we have, again, an issue. I think, well, this might be a no-brainer question, but how many knows Prometheus? And how many have used the UI of Prometheus, or the very, well, console? So.
You mean the crappy one, not Grafana?
Yes, exactly that one. Yeah, so the crappy one has a big issue, even though it's there almost always, and usually it's just enabled. It doesn't offer any kind of authentication. And that's just one example. There are many tools that are kind of created and have UIs which are crappier or nicer, but still, they are just UIs without any authentication, without any authorization. So everyone who knows the address can go there and do their things. And with some services, it's quite bad thing. With Prometheus, well, it might be a bad thing, but not so bad thing. And yeah, so for example, Prometheus, Alert Manager, Thanos, Weave Scope, and test applications also those all have same thing, that if there is no built-in authentication or authorization, well, if you know the address, you can go there and do whatever you can do with those tools. And yeah, you can of course close those UIs, but for example, with Alert Manager alerts, it's quite annoying to close it because then the links in the alerts are not valid. And also, if you go to Alert Manager UI, you can't go to the graphs because that also points to Prometheus. So, and yet part of those can be customized, but well, just part. So we need again some solution. Again, Oauth, but this time Oauth to Proxy. You see there's some kind of common thing with these both tools. So because the authentication or normally traffic comes through Ingress, it's easy point that, okay, we use Ingress to authenticate things. And that's what Oauth to Proxy does. So we can use Ingress annotations to enable authentication. And also we can enable the kind of, well, authentication levels, let's say, that only members of this group from the OEDC provider can access, and some people from this other group can't, or something like that. So it's not authorization in a sense, but you still have some levels to limit the access. And yeah, of course, for some of those tools like Prometheus, you have Grafana, which has the full-fledged authentication, but that's not case for the all the necessarily, or all, for example, the own applications. So again, something to show. This is the one that I mentioned. This actually bounds nicely with the previous presentation. So thing called view scope. It's the, you might know this network provider Viewnet. This is their tool, but this doesn't require usage of the Viewnet. It works nicely with all the other things. And what this service does is basically shows you how the traffic goes at the cluster. So, for example, in this first service, I have internet. Traffic comes to the Ingress. Then it actually, you see there's Oauth proxy. So actually, even though, again, you didn't see it, it actually authenticated me with the GitHub credentials. And then there's view scope. And you might think, okay, how this information is something that should be protected. Well, the thing is that actually this in a way opens some things that are not necessarily even meant for the managed Kubernetes view to handle. So, boom, boom, boom.
At least back in the day, it had execution, like a command line as well. For other,
yes, actually.
Probably not anymore, but.
Actually, it does. So basically, it's part of this tool. That one thing, but it does, it shows you nicely this, okay, this is how network traffic goes. Then what you can also do, you can execute commands in those. Or, yeah, not necessarily working nicely here, but you get the idea. And
start typing.
and as said, this is not all, because this was for the pod or container import. You can also do the same thing for the nodes. So basically, you can use this same tool if you, for some reason, need to do some, let's say, Docker PS or something like that at the nodes. You can use this tool for that also. So it has nice visualizations and it has nice features, but something you probably doesn't want to give kind of out of public.
But it can be said that you need to have the cluster admin access to do those kind of things. Or at least the exec.
Yeah, but the pods have it. Because this is using service accounts of pods. It doesn't know anything about me. It just knows that, okay, I'm running here, and so it's basically the privileged containers there.
Yeah, it doesn't. But I mean, if you don't give the service, like the view scope itself,
the
access,
yeah.
Then,
No, that's the question.
Yeah.
Sounds super scary.
Yeah, but it
So
goes.
is the security guy.
Yeah. it goes through the API server. That kind of connection. It's not SSH. It's actually through the API server. But yeah, you can disallow it, but then part of it goes away.
Yeah. Actually, they have at Helm charts they have the option to disable some parts, but as I said, there are times that when this is nice thing for the admins to do it, so you don't have to open the shell, for example, or something like that. But to kind of make you feel a bit better, I just show something else now.
Yeah, we definitely don't expose it just without any extra configuration to the public network. That's not a good idea.
So now making you sleep a bit better, taking the incognito windows or private window. So basically, this is what Oauth 2 proxy does. So you don't have to sign in all the time, but still the calls to the ingress paths that are protected with those annotations are protected. So, and even though you would write that address, you would not be able to log in because you are not at the correct organization or correct group. Or I think that no one here is.
Sorry, you mentioned Prometheus
Yeah.
and Alert Manager and how the links between them don't usually work. And yes, that's super annoying. Do you have them running? I mean, does this actually allow you to have working links between them?
Actually, the links, I think that the problem is not directly about the non-working link. The problem is that if you have those links, you have to have public and ingress endpoints. So with this one, you just annotate the ingresses. So basically, you still have those, but no one can access those if not at the correct organization or correct group.
Makes sense.
So, again, issue. It's kind of, but now there's Oauth mentioned, but I think not proxy this time. So, if we have multiple applications running or needing this Oauth, and we have, let's say, enterprise Azure AD maintenance people who require ticket for everything, you kind of tend to think that, do I need to have the separate application for everything? And well, basically, if you want to have the at many URLs, you have to do that. But that's kind of boring. You can't handle things yourself because all the time you just create tickets, please create this application, this application, this application. So, solution, again, DEX, which is basically IDP. And how it works, so basically we have DEX running at a cluster, and DEX can have multiple IDPs backends. So basically now it has only GitHub, so it doesn't give me any UI, but if I have multiple, every time I have to select which one I use. And then at the kind of other part, because it's kind of my own control, I can create the applications when I need it. So for example, Gangway has the Oauth application, Kube OEDC proxy, of course, one application, Oauth 2 proxy, one application. So much easier to just register the application of DEX to GitHub and then register all those other applications to DEX. So DEX provides the token handling basically. And as said, I had only one backend authentication, but there can be multiple. Then it's just a matter of mapping of those groups, because of course, if you have Azure AD groups, you get different looking groups than from GitHub, for example. So it then just kind of normal maintenance or configuration thing. So the final outcome was that users were able to use Kubernetes API and applications with GitHub credentials. And kind of the rights were able to be handled inside GitHub. So they didn't need to have G-Cloud or MS or AWS credentials. So kind of simplified management that you don't have to create users and over again and then think, okay, what rights to give. And also allowed to kind of the closer development to handle the rights there. And also, one thing that was done with this DEX running at the cluster was that it also is able to authenticate the external application, so it's not limited inside Kubernetes. So, for example, we had Cloud, the HashiCorp Vault running at Cloud Run, which was able to authenticate using DEX. So, again, we could have created new applications at GitHub site, but why to do it? Because it's easier to just include the Vault installation to same Terraform and also this OAuth2 token creations and stuff like that. And even though I mentioned here final, I still have some time, yes.
Yes.
There was or is also alternatives which might have made. So first, yeah, those who see things red or blue now, OpenShift is not here. I don't think about if getting big pile of money and giving it someone, then you might get the things, but there's, I think, better use for that money also. But yeah, Rancher was one. So basically, kind of managing UI for the Kubernetes and also creation of the new clusters. And it can be also installed to the kind of cluster and use it internally. But it's a bit heavy, and we didn't got it kind of working. So it makes quite a lot of things, and most of those things work.
Excuse me, what is CRD?
Coming there.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then the other alternative, I mentioned the Tremolo security already, and they have this tool called Open Unison. And to be honest, I would think that if we would have made this exercise half a year later, it might be that I wouldn't, all previous talks you could forget, and I would have talked just about the Open Unison. So basically, it productized the same kind of stack with nice UI. And yeah, the CRD, so custom resource definitions. So basically, DEX uses those to save the configuration, but they are not, at least officially they say that users shouldn't touch those. So it's more like database for DEX. And normally CRDs are make things simple to configure or use things inside the cluster. So for example, Prometheus operator, you have the CADs that how many Prometheuses you want, what kind of Prometheus, etc.
So Kubernetes is essentially evolving to become a general purpose database, not for fast reads and writes like MySQL or something like that, but for configuration, that kind of describing all of your infrastructure configuration, that you can make your own types, upload those to Kubernetes, and then manage them in the same way as you would manage any other Kubernetes resource.
So basically, in this sense, for example, if I want to have new client to the DEX, I have to create the configuration file inside the config map or inside the secrets that say that, okay, this kind of, this application secret, this application key, this URL. And it's quite cumbersome because that means that I have to basically generate over and over again the same configuration. So the CRDs are quite much simpler in that sense. But that said, even though DEX saves things to CRDs, it doesn't allow to use those. So that's something that the Open Unison has better thing. And of course, for some people, the nice UI is a nice thing. But yeah, that's it. So some links and for the tools mentioned can be found there. And any questions?
Have you tried OKD already?
Sorry?
Have you tried OKD?
OKD.
OpenShift Kubernetes distribution, I guess.
Well, I have used OpenShift, and I had to say that quite many things that have very big price tag are doable free.
Check out OKD for .NET. The price tag is quite affordable.
Maybe OpenShift has kind of, let's say, bad taste because of now version 3 and also the update path to version 4. So basically the name itself is kind of but that's just me. And maybe also some business people who see the price tag.
Have you ever tried to use the Oauth proxy with a service mesh? I know, but Linkerd and Istio supports like.
No, just with actually the ingress in this case was the Nginx. So. Yep.
You integrated the authentication and authorization with the GitHub, but are there any open source solutions? Have you tried any?
Well, basically, the GitHub was just because everything was already there, and I think that nice thing with GitHub is that it's quite far it's free. So, but basically, the DEX can be replaced with any IDP which would directly do these things. So, but haven't tried. I think the customer itself actually was using this key cloak because it kind of does same things with the DEX, but it's a bit heavier and it goes a bit other direction with the UI things and stuff. But it's basically the same thing. Okay, if that was all then, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Kudos
Thank you
for
very much.
defying the demo gods multiple times.
Definitely, it's not every day that happens. Yeah, so we'll take another break of, I don't know, same thing, 20-ish minutes or something like that.
Wait a minute,
Well.
just nothing but breaks today.
Yeah, it's now well, post-COVID. People seem to have a lot of be enjoying it in the breaks. So
No
yes.
talk about the sub-variants.
Yeah, no. Let's not go there. But what was good in bringing up was that it would probably be quite nice to have a talk in the future about the CRDs. It's one of the primary ways to extend Kubernetes. So and to build kind of higher level abstractions on top. So that was a good tip. Maybe for a coming. Oh, nice. I don't need to do anything. Nice.
So all the art linked together.
Yes. Okay, we found a team. Yes.
Yeah, but I often have trouble with some acronyms that are not open in the first appearance.
Yes. Yeah. Grab some more pizza if there is. I think there is. And then we'll be back in 20-25 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, tässä kiitokseksi. Oikein hyvä. Mielenkiintoinen se. Kiitos.
but it's running in Minikube. We can't take that to production, right? This is just the bootstrap cluster. This is the start. We need to get rid of it, basically. So we want to move all of this into the target cluster and then just blow it to pieces. And things will keep running. Of course, we can have more clusters. Like, this is not the only one. This is just the management cluster from where we will manage all other clusters. From that, we can create many new workload clusters and manage through it. So that's what I'm going to show. And let's see what's the easiest way to do this. I have a recording if this proves to be too difficult. Like that. So now we are checking the bootstrap cluster here. We can see there is one node, Minikube. We can see there are lots of pods. You can see bare metal operator, something, copy, that's cluster API, all of these things running in Minikube, okay? There. And we can see all the, okay, that was weird. We can see all these custom resource objects in here. So these are not native Kubernetes, but this is what we get when we run this whole thing. We have BMH, bare metal host, okay? What more? We have a cluster, machines, metal 3 cluster, and metal 3 machines. These are like at different levels in this whole stack. But we can see that all of these objects are in the Minikube cluster, and that's what we are trying to solve. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to first get the kube config of the target cluster. Of course, the cluster API knows how to do that. Where did that go? I don't see. There, yeah. Cluster cuttle is the command line tool for interacting with cluster API. I'm getting the kube config for the cluster that I'm running, and then I'm checking what's in this target cluster. Okay, we can see it has 2 nodes, and it has, what did I have done here? Pods. But you can see that none of these bare metal operator or these things are running in there. It doesn't know anything about this yet. So we will need to add that. We can also see that it doesn't know what is this cluster, machine, metal 3 cluster, and all that. It's not there yet.
You haven't yet installed the extensions?
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to do that now. Let me take a few steps here. Like this. So now what I'm doing here first of all, the bare metal operator is not sort of part of the whole cluster API thing. That's a prerequisite, right? So I will need to manually do things with that. Cluster cuttle doesn't know anything about it. But for the other part, I'm running down here, cluster cuttle init. It installs all the necessary things, the cluster API controllers, the cluster API metal 3 thing, because I asked it to do that. It even installs Circ Manager and some things like that. What's the time, by the way?
You're still 9 minutes.
Yeah, good.
I don't know, like this big clock skew, for me at least it says 51, but at yours 53. But go ahead.
Interesting. Then I need to install Ironic and the bare metal operator. Like I said, those are not part of the actual cluster API things. So yeah, they need to be added separately. Just going through that quickly. Let me actually take that as well. All right, and we are almost there. So now we will execute the move command with cluster cattle. What this does is it moves all of the custom resources that we saw in the Minikube cluster, the cluster, the machines, all of those things, it moves over into the target cluster so we can start managing them there. So let's see. You will see here, it's discovering cluster API objects. And then you see that it actually only finds one thing, a cluster. And this is the beauty of cluster API, is that all the things string together. Everything is owned by a cluster at the top. The cluster owns the machines and everything underneath. So the only thing that we need to find is one cluster and then follow the chain of ownership. All the way down, we find everything that belongs to this cluster and move it over. And now we can see, I'll just run this whole thing. We take a look at what we have in the target cluster now. You can see, well, it has barely gotten there. You can see Ironic is still fighting to get up there. But you can see that now we actually find things here. We have a cluster, it's 45 seconds old. It was moved here, so of course it doesn't need to go through now provisioning and everything. Everything is already there, but we have moved it over into the actual cluster where that we are managing. And here we have the MetalCube machines also. Now we can do a Minikube delete, and you will see that things keep working even after we removed all traces of that bootstrap cluster. So now you see it's still here. Let me see if we can get the pods. Yeah, and now you can see Ironic is also up and running now. So that's it for me. And yeah, if you have questions, please.
Where was it running now? Like when you moved your cluster from your local Minikube, where did it actually then go?
So we moved all the controllers into the actual cluster that we already had. It was basically to virtual machines.
Oh, right.
Yep.
If you try the MetalCube with Ironic on OpenStack.
You mean for sorry, I'm not sure how exactly Ironic is used in OpenStack. I know it's used there, but
No problem.
No problem. Okay.
It was just curiosity because you are working Ericsson uses OpenStack for Kubernetes orchestration.
Yeah.
Where's the curiosity come from?
Yeah. Actually, I also work on another cluster API provider, which is for OpenStack. So instead of going through this whole thing with bare metal hosts, we provision OpenStack machines and use them as a cluster.
Yes.
So this is very interesting. Yes.
Kind of going back to his question, do you happen to know the details of the Ironic deployment in, is that part of the bare metal operator, or do you have a separate deployment for Ironic?
Ironic is completely separate and is actually outside of the MetalCube project. So,
got it. Are you deploying that in Cube itself then? Is that a pod as well? Is that
sorry, which one?
Ironic.
Ironic.
Is that in Cube itself as well? Is that a pod?
Yes, in this case.
Are you doing that then with the Bifrost project, or are you doing that with Keystone and everything? Because
that I'm not sure. I don't know the details, sorry. In this case, I know that we are running Ironic inside the Kubernetes. We also do test it with Ironic outside of Kubernetes. I know that much.
All right. And then the other question, completely unrelated, is you have an IPAM as part of MetalCube.
Yes.
What does the network layout look like?
Good question. I'm not the best to answer this. I think there is one, we call it provisioning network for Ironic to talk to the servers and all that. And then there is another network for like the Kubernetes level where the nodes talk to each other. But yeah, I do have some graphs in here somewhere. I don't know if I can find them right now, but I would be happy to talk more about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think my main concern really, curiosity,
Yeah.
is how do you handle do you have a separate network for the BMC, and how do you handle that?
Yes, there is a separate network for that, and I don't know the details, unfortunately.
Sure.
Yeah,
No worries.
I have only been with Ericsson for 1 year, and I'm mainly working in the cluster API level. So Ironic is still a bit like that for me.
Sure.
Yeah. Any more questions?
You had a question.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had a question,
Yeah.
but maybe that's on the ironic level, and maybe
Could be.
that's more difficult to answer.
It's also possible that some of my colleagues
That's
know it
also
more.
true.
Yeah.
No, but so when you had the 2 virtual machines,
Yes.
what did you have to do on them or to them to make them known to the system? Did you have to install something on them? I mean, surely they had at least some kind of base operating system on them, but I mean,
Yes.
sort of,
They
how
are.
do they need to be?
So they are first booted with this Ironic Python agent. So that is an agent that you boot into memory, and Ironic talks to that, basically tells it, please boot this now, and it will then grab some other boot image and boot that instead. So this Ironic Python agent is always running there. Yeah. And I don't know actually the super details about how the interaction is there. And there.
If it helps,
Yeah.
like a very small summary
Yeah.
is that Ironic. The first thing that it'll do is that it's gonna try to pixie boot to any
Yeah.
computer that it's broadcasting in the network, and then I'm just skipping over a lot of details, but
Sure.
he's gonna try to do that. It's gonna then deploy I think it used to be a CentOS image. Now they're trying to do CoreOS, if I remember correctly.
No, it's zeros usually.
It's zeros now.
Basically, it's do provision
Oh,
and
okay.
collect this information.
Dude, I'm old. I'm on the times. I'm talking about Ironic in 2016.
Okay.
So please, please correct me. Anyway,
To do the
so
inspection.
zeros nowadays, that's gonna deploy the Ironic Python agent image. There's gonna be a very minimal image that is gonna give you basic information about what are the drivers that the image the components that the machine has, and give the information back to the Ironic server.
Like RAID
Right.
controllers and things like that. Yeah.
That's right. And then after that, that process ends. That I think the process is called still introspection. Is that still
Yes,
the case?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
That's
I don't
right.
know. It used to be introspection.
I'm fucking old.
Oh, yeah.
Please correct me. Keep going. Because I'd like to know. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then once introspection is done, then you have the machine registered in the system. In Ironic, you store all the APMI credentials and so on. I don't know if Ironic finally got secret storage in place, because they used to be in fucking clear text, which I hated.
I can say.
No, maybe. But
I can say so much that what I provide to the system to make it known is basically in this bare metal host definition in Kubernetes, you give the address, obviously, where to find the machine, and some credentials, basically a secret in Kubernetes. What really happens then, I'm not sure. That should go from the bare metal operator to Ironic in some way. But what Ironic does with it, I don't know.
Back in the day, it was clear text in the
Yeah.
Ironic database.
so it's clear text. I mean those credentials.
It's secrets in Kubernetes. It's secrets in Kubernetes, yeah. So you can have encryption at rest there, but as mentioned, it must go to Ironic in some way, and yeah. Like between Ironic and the bare metal operator, there we can have encryption of the traffic, obviously. Yeah.
But anyway, that's how it goes. bare metal provisioning projects do something similar. The Tinkerbell project, which does very similar thing, has a similar thing called boots, and it's effectively the same thing except that it's an Alpine image instead of zeros. So,
Thank you.
but they all suck in security.
How long does it take to boot a new node? Like, let's say you get the traffic spike and you have a fairly new data center with like some blade servers and you need new nodes. Do you need to like preheat the cluster and
you are way ahead of what's taking time, at least in our CI. Like first, you need to do this whole inspection. That already takes, I think, 15 minutes almost before it's done. And then you just discovered what hardware there is. Then you still need to like download the boot image, boot it, do some kubeadm stuff or things like that to actually get the cluster, and then you can start getting in your container images.
Any limitations in terms of the nodes? How many nodes you can introspect at the same time? So let's say you have 100 nodes.
Yeah.
And what is there any kind of limitations you can introspect? I mean, you cannot introspect 100 of them, right?
No. I'm not sure. I think I heard something about 50, but I'm not sure if that's like in or yeah.
Back in the day, the limitation was ironic.
Yeah,
the ironic server could not take as many connections because it was a very slow Python server that needed to connect to MySQL database, and that was the big bottleneck at the time.
We are working a little bit also with a kind of multi-tenancy in this. I know, like right now, in that case, we can have multiple ironics, like say one for I don't know, one server rack or something like that, and yeah, in a way you can scale it up that way. Sorry. Yep.
So this is awesome, and thank you for the presentation. I stand up. I'm American, so I'm a little different from the rest of the people here. So excellent presentation, thank you, and excellent questions. There are limitations, but at the same time, you are able to upgrade this gradually. So what type of working groups are you using, to help you? Because here you have you have simply the best, as Tina Turner would say. So are you recruiting, because here it would be prime real estate to recruit,
Ericsson is recruiting, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
It was in the previous slide.
Yeah, I think it was there. We are welcoming all kinds of contributions.
You don't have to come to Ericsson.
I'm obviously on the open source side of things. We also have, of course, internal projects and yeah.
We
Things
used
like
to
that.
say different company, same team.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's it for me, I think. You can. Do you want to say some closing words, or?
No. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.